Okay, it is 1:03 and we can go ahead and get started if you're ready.
Okay, my name is Jim Suydam, and I'm Director of Media Relations here at Texas A&M System, and I'm not an academic and I'm not an educator, so you'll have to bear with me here. What I am is an old newspaper guy who went into working. I worked some in politics and I worked in public relations a little bit, and then I came over here about 3 years ago, and I've really enjoyed working in higher education. I like it because I don't have to have any reservations about what I'm doing with my time. Like in PR, people don't hire you in public relations if they don't be a good PR guy. Anyway, that aside, I appreciate your time, and even if they did make you do this, I hope to make it useful for you. We've got some real superstars gathered here today. I asked them to come and join us because they're people who I've noticed in my time here at the system have been able to be researchers and be academics, but also work well with the media and use it to help augment what they're doing, what their mission is. It's
Jim,
yes, ma'am.
If you just let me interrupt, I just want to make sure that people know who you are. So I want to introduce you properly, so that we can have a full appreciation for the work that you do. So Jim Sudam is the Director of Media Relations for Texas A&M University System. Previously, he has worked as Press Secretary for Texas Land Commissioner Jerry Patterson and as a speechwriter for George P. Bush. He's also worked to advance legislative issues at Bavaro, an Austin public relations firm. He began his career as a newspaper reporter. He worked on the state desk at the Austin American Statesman, was the Metro editor at the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, and was a courts and crime reporter at Lubbock Avalanche Journal. He graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a bachelor's in journalism in 1993, and we are pleased to have him as part of our Research Visibility series, and he's got a success panel with him today. And thank you, Jim.
Well, and I'm sorry, Karen, I just started off there. I already feel like I've gotten halfway through my beginning here. And I'm reluctant to even mention that I went to UT and that I only have a bachelor's. That makes me probably the least educated person on this entire call. But what I'd like to do, I've brought 3 people who are academics and are educators, and they're media superstars, I think. And I guess I'd like to start with, I'm not sure Dr. Newman's been able to make it yet. I plan to have Dr. Ben Newman start up, and he is a virologist who we brought from the Texarkana campus to the flagship because he's really amazing at his ability to explain complicated things in simple ways. And he relates a lot of that back to, he credits that to his media training that he got at Reading University back in the UK. And so I was hoping he for a minute, but we'll move along without him. Next up, we've got Thomas Mitchell. He's a law professor at Texas A&M's law school, which is increasingly prestigious. He also worked as a Capitol Hill legislative director for a congressman from rural Texas and is associate for a top DC law firm. He was also a judicial clerk for a federal judge. But what Thomas has really done that's I think is neat is, well, he's a 2020 MacArthur Fellow recipient, and he got that for his work in protecting private property rights in a legal system that was stacked against African Americans. And he's the author, the primary author of the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, which addresses the problem of inheriting common real property that is split between multiple owners. His efforts have led to the passage of this law in 13 states, I believe, and he hopes to pass it in 25 states. And I don't could have done much of this without successfully working with the media. And I was hoping Thomas could talk about that, tell his story, and tell you all how it's helped him. Are you up for that, Thomas?
Sure. Just one update. We're up to 18 states and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have a majority of the southern states with 8 states.
I think I
and
froze.
We got, are you still there? You're frozen, Jim.
Okay, I'm unfrozen.
You're unfrozen, yeah. So I think, and with the enactment we had in California last summer, we're now it's the law in states with the majority of the US population. But anyway, that's just an update on that. So I'd say, let me just kind of talk initially about my involvement with the media as it relates to my law reform and policy work, which only part of that work is part of my compensated job, but it's overall a significant part of my national reputation. So initially, it happened by serendipity. I had been working on scholarship, trying to raise the level of awareness of this particular property law that is a significant contributor to the loss of property among African Americans and other disadvantaged communities. So I kind of wrote what's considered the seminal law review article in that. And this is where it was just serendipity. In 2000, the Associated Press got interested in the issue of Black land loss. Part of it was a follow-on to the settlement of the African-American class action, farmers class action lawsuit against the USDA, the Pigford versus Glickman case. These two AP reporters were just incredible. They obviously got significant funding because it was a 6-month investigative report. And when they were visiting and traveling and spending time with many people in several southern states, they stumbled upon this property law that I studied. At the time I studied it, it wasn't within legal academia considered the ticket to fame and glory. It kind of involved rural people, African Americans, and poverty, which is not usually the ticket to fame and glory as a property law professor in the United States. But because I was kind of occupying the field, when they asked folks they were meeting with in these various southern states, well, who's the national legal expert? I was kind of occupying the field. So the AP published that. It ended up being a part of a 3-part series that won major media awards. And it really was that AP article that cracked open the door that enabled us to pursue this state law reform in a way that it could spread throughout the United States. It got the attention of the American Bar Association. And before this time, beginning in the early 1970s, a number of southern states had tried to reform this state property law. And all of those efforts at reform met the graveyard because they were not given the prominence from major organizations like the American Bar Association. They had little media coverage. So it really was the catalyst. And now when I give academic talks, people always want to attribute, or most often want to attribute it to me, especially other academics. They're like, oh, it was your research, it was your academic study, it was your articles. And I always say, no, it's not. My article was necessary, but not sufficient. If there hadn't been the media coverage, we never would have had that opportunity. So what I learned from that lesson, at least in that part of my work, was that, our scholarship is important, but it oftentimes needs to be supplemented depending upon which audience you're talking about. If you're purely trying to build your academic career, it helps to have the media, and it helps to have social media presences to bring more attention to your article or to your scholarship and your research that can redound to your benefit within academia. But sometimes if you're trying to reach audiences that are beyond academia, the media can be just incredibly important. So what I stumbled upon, or what happened by serendipity back in 2001, taught me the importance of having a media consciousness and a media strategy. So we have accomplished the reform of this law in states throughout this country. And when I started, the received wisdom was that not a single state would ever change this law. But in a number of the states, we've worked in tandem with the media. And the media has given our issue profile. It's gotten the attention of important stakeholders. And so right now, I always have an intentional media strategy. In my legal reform work, sometimes that is, I want media presence. Sometimes it's, I don't want media presence. I want to fly below the radar screen so that I don't attract opposition or increase the chances of attracting opposition. But I'm going to put that aside. because I assume that we're talking about in academia. And so just having that kind of media presence, I think, just really can put a spotlight on your scholarship. And sometimes having that spotlight on your scholarship outside of academia can actually raise the profile of your reputation within academia. So it sometimes could be like a virtuous cycle that your attention in the media, there sometimes is an assumption if you're getting that kind of attention, your work must be important. And that can then very much increase your profile in academia. And the last thing I'll note, because I feel like I'm talking too much, is, our dean we had a faculty meeting last week, and he was very much encouraging people to take advantage of opportunities to be in the media because it raises the profile of our particular law school and of the university more generally, right? And so just for that like instrumental purpose, it can be helpful if you're the administration of whatever your department or school or university is, sees these positive media coverage of you. It can't hurt, let me put it that way, and it probably can help you.
Well, on that note, I can say the importance of the coverage up here. First thing the chancellor does when he wakes up in the morning is he looks at the clips that someone here in the office has compiled. Someone up here in the office is up here at 4 a.m. compiling news clips around the world, condensing it down into a format that the chancellor and the regents can consume. And it's the first thing they look at, and that's how they start their day. It's that important. Each individual story the chancellor likes to have cut and paste and sent to him individually via text, so he can then send those stories to other regents or to business people or other people he knows. It's their life. So on that note, I guess I'd like to hear some from Dr. Hunt. Dr. Hunt is she's very technical. She teaches primarily in the thermal fluid sciences, including fluid mechanics and thermodynamics. Her research interests include energetic explosive material reactions and synthetic high-speed infrared imaging, and engineering education and assessment. She currently holds 2 patents for work in developing a novel nanostructure materials. And in addition to her research and writing, Dr. Hunt also sees an ambitious group of engineering and grad students who work to commercialize patents they've obtained for West Texas A&M and the Texas A&M University system. It's called Buffalo Technology Group. Dr. Hunt is the Dean of Engineering up at West Texas A&M. Could you tell us a little bit, Dr. Hunt, about how you got started working with the media as an engineering professor?
Yes, absolutely. We had done some media off and on because we're a regional university and we're in West Texas. We're pretty much out here all by ourselves, and a lot of the state doesn't think much about what's happening in this part of things. And so we always want to participate in anything that we can that's media based. But probably what has been most transformative for me in my lab is that we've been working in nanomaterial research for the last several years. And we were, talking to people about antimicrobials or antivirals during this time, and nobody cared. But then when the first wave of COVID happened, it started, January-ish is when we started talking about it all over. Well, in March, when things started to change for the Texas A&M University system as a whole, we actually had the opportunity to work with Jim's group because we had developed some materials that were directly antiviral and that had a new relevance, just even for our neighbors than they had before. So we had the opportunity to do some media with him, and that having this kind of work at the right time, but working with Jim to communicate it in a way that mattered to people and that really gave the A&M system some reach and validity during this time was important to us. So it was really great because these articles first started coming out. Some of our materials that we work with have copper, and the the very first article that came out that everyone read from New England Journal of Medicine talked about copper and its efficacy. And then just a couple of days later, we got to release this video on how the A&M system and West Texas A&M is working in this field and what we've developed so far. And I mean, it just blew up from there, and it turned into all kinds of interviews and news interviews and radio shows and articles. And it really did a lot for us as far as our university here in West Texas being a place where people are doing real research that's relevant. It, you know, kind of got us on a map in a different way than we had been able to before. So, and like Jim said, any opportunity we have up here to be leaders in technology, any kind of research development, like we want to get that out there. So we really saw a difference from this interaction. It was one of the most positive interactions that we've had even during our research career. I mean, we've published and spoken at conferences and done all the normal things, but this was really different. And I would say one of the things that we really loved about it was that it did connect our research in a general but meaningful way to the population. And I don't think that's always easy to do when you work in fields like ours.
Well, and what we did basically is she had been working on this. She developed this patch made of copper that you stick on a door that keeps it clean. And I'm not a scientist. And when I write something, I frame it up for. I imagine who I'm going to be talking to, and a lot of times it's a producer for a morning TV show. And I know from my experience that a producer at a morning TV show is probably under 30. She probably has a bachelor's degree in communications. She, is probably from an urban area. She doesn't know much about anything deep, but she knows a lot about a smattering of everything. And so I try to take what Dr. Hunt's doing up there and kind of condense it and communicate it to her. I think of it sometimes like feeding baby birds. The mama bird has to chew up the worm and do all the chewing and all the work, and then you regurgitate it to them, but it should be in a form that they can take down simply. Don't make them do any work. And so I try to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes I try to imagine explaining it to my mother, honestly. And I know that I don't mean to insult my mother, but she was not an academic. And when I was a newspaper reporter or editor, sometimes that would work. When a reporter would come in with a messed up story, I would sit down, and actually once had a reporter call his mother and tell her what he was writing about. And he told it to her in such a simple way that I said, now just write that down. And so maybe I'd say that stories maybe is a way to help you understand, to think about how it is you communicate to the general public when you're doing it. You're not talking to academics, you're talking to the people you'll meet in the grocery store. And what you're doing is probably pretty neat and pretty cool, and they're probably interested in it, but they might need a little bit of help getting in the door to where you are. And I think we can sometimes help provide that in your marketing and communications offices, just because we're not so entrenched in any little world or any one world.
My group needed a lot of help, and we got it, because he would ask a question and we would answer it, and he would say, no, they're going to try again. Like, let's think about how you're going to say that. Something else that was really impactful for us. So one, learning to communicate about our research to the public, but two, having this kind of news coverage also opened up some options for us we wouldn't have had otherwise. We were some of the first to actually get to test our material against the first and second COVID strands. And so we got access to it because some people had seen this coverage and wanted to know if we wanted to test directly. There were several different things that came out of this kind of positive news experience for us.
Well, I was hoping the beginning part would convince everybody why they would want to do this. And I guess that as the second part, I was going to go kind of a rudimentary media training, if that was okay with y'all. If you have any other questions for Dr. Hunt or for Dr. Mitchell, though, I encourage you to please ask them now, because I was going to let them bail out and not have to sit through my media training because they're very busy as well. So are there any questions?
I'm happy to take any questions. I mean, one thing I'll say, if I don't know if people are thinking about a question or not thinking, is that sometimes you got to start small and it'll build up. So, earlier in my career, there was typically a local newspaper, a regional newspaper, occasionally a national newspaper. But I think that in some ways that kind of built up my experience. And I think, as Jim was indicating, I had to learn how to, when I talk to the media, not talk as an academic, realize, as he said, they want things very simple. So you have to be attentive to what that audience is, and that's the general public, or whoever is the readership of, or whoever is the viewership of the media. You can, I've had many experiences where I'll talk to a reporter for 60 minutes, sometimes 90 minutes. And you know what that results in, and this is typical, I think Jim will back me up on this, that might result in one quote, right? Now, what you've talked to them about oftentimes will provide context for other pieces of the story, but that's not necessarily attributed to you. So you have to, kind of realize that a lot of that is the background. So you're helping them frame the story. And that is a contribution. And then, the bottom line is whether or not you're quoted once or you have a page length worth of quotes. Those things are going to get to, I assume, Jim, like the fact you're mentioned in the media. It doesn't get to Jim if you only are, mentioned and they're quoting you like 1,000 words. If you have that one quote and you're identified as, especially the institutional affiliation, that's going to get to your media and marketing communications people. So that's one thing that you kind of got to get over, like being frustrated. Earlier in my career, I was like, I spoke to them for 90 minutes and I got one quote, and I started realizing that's typical, right? Sometimes I'll also say, although this doesn't always go hand in hand, is that sometimes maintaining your social media presence, which I used to not care about at all, but I started understanding the importance of that. So I do have a LinkedIn, I got a Twitter page, and sometimes reporters I find, either they find out about my work, they find out about it in a variety of ways, right? Sometimes they see other media that I've been in. Sometimes they talk to, I don't know, whoever they're talking to, lawyers, sometimes impacted landowners who have heard about me. But sometimes they're like, oh, I was on your LinkedIn page or I was on your Twitter account. And I see that, you've spoken at a variety of conferences, you've testified. So I've had a heightened awareness of kind of maintaining my social media presence, because media establishments sometimes are the consumers of my social media accounts. And so there's kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two.
I do have a couple of questions, if you'll indulge me, and whoever it fits can answer this question, or it might be interesting to get a response from everyone, including you, Jen. The question is, what social media platforms should you start with? And this is for someone who's just jumping out there and has not done any social media in a professional capacity.
I hate it, but Twitter. I hate Twitter.
But that's what you would recommend?
Yeah. It's reporters use Twitter. As Dr. Mitchell said, it's got such a reach that a couple of hashtags and you can be worldwide, but also it's got such a reach that a couple of keystrokes and you can be worldwide. It cuts both ways. So I wouldn't put anything up there that you wouldn't want to yell out your front door in front of everybody you know. A lot of times I've seen professors there's who represent their college and represent their own views through their Twitter account, and angry people calling up at the chancellor's office wondering, what are we going to do with this guy? And we're like, well, we're not going to do anything with him. He's got academic freedom, but he's not necessarily serving the purpose he meant to with his Twitter feed. It can easily be used as an ego position, but it can be also used effectively to further your mission as a researcher. And so you just got to be careful. I mean, with Twitter, yeah, even if like I hate it, I don't personally use Twitter, and here I am telling you to.
Yeah.
But nobody pays me for what I think. I'm here to help the chancellor get his message across. So anything I say or think is probably going to work against me.
I mean, it's also helpful that, you have to, with Twitter, boil it down to what your essential message is, right? Because you're only given a certain number of characters, and it's actually good training for the media is, in an interview, you have to think of a subset of what you're going to say is what they're going to report. And you have to, as you're thinking about it, it just can't be bland factual information. There's got to be some hook to what you're saying. So you got to kind of think, what are the themes? What are the messages? But boil down to 2 or 3, bite-sized points, as opposed to the PhD dissertation version, because they really don't want to hear that.
Dr. Hunt?
This is a weakness of mine, but what I will say is my research group maintains some nice social media. They use LinkedIn quite a bit to keep just generating content like what we're doing currently. But yeah, again, this is a weakness for me, so I'm not the best to answer.
Okay, Jim?
You can also take advantage of the marketing and communications staff at your university. I know Candace over at Prairie View is fantastic. And if you wanted to learn about how to use Twitter better, just give her a call, and she can set you up with the right person and probably give you a one-on-one, and take advantage of those people that are there to help you. They're not just a pain in the butt when they call you. They can actually provide benefit to what it is you're doing.
That is actually a component of this research visibility series that we're doing, and that is setting up a Twitter account. So great advice.
Yeah, so I think also there's the individual accounts that you have as an individual, but I'll get things. Sometimes it's it's a big conference I've participated in. Sometimes it's a legislative success I've had. And for a subset of my work, I then talk to our law school because they have a Twitter account, they have a LinkedIn account, they have a Facebook page. I can't be on that every month, but a few times a year. So they'll make an assessment. Does this rise to the level of being, media worthy for their purposes? And so that sometimes helps. Sometimes they'll repost something I posted on my social media, and then they'll put their gloss on it. So that's something you should also think about, is not just having your own social media accounts, but working with your school, department, university. Sometimes it's been the university marketing and communications people that have sent stuff out. So, you got to be selective about what you think are those opportunities, but there are certainly, it could be a subset of your media presence that the university helps push out as well. Thank you.
Jim?
Well, that's just back to taking advantage of the folks that you have there to help you. Let's talk about an example real quick. Tarleton University has a dairy barn, and they had been trying to get press on the fact that they had these biomonitoring devices that they would hang on their cows and tell them when they were ovulating or when they were hungry or thirsty or whatever. It gave them all sorts of data. I was able to help them get press on this because I wrote it up as Fitbits for cows, and the researchers involved with the research were like, well, these are not Fitbits, these are, and they went all into a bunch of details about what they were. And I'm like, I understand all that, but we're trying to, the hook is that people, somebody's mother out in Plano who's got 2 kids and she's watching the news, she understands what Fitbits are. She wears a Fitbit. We've all of a sudden made your research relatable to her. She understands that Fitbit monitors her health, and by putting it through a looking at it through a different lens, we got them tons of coverage. We got Dallas to come down and do a 6-minute segment on their Fitbits for cows. but the researchers just had to get over the representation of their research as being Fitbits for cows rather than bovine cow, monitoring remote devices or whatever they were calling it. And so reach out for the people that at your university and help find your story if you need to, because everybody's got a story. I mean, if you're involved in research that consumes your life, I would assume that there's something in it that's interesting to you, and you're probably not that different than a lot of other people, that there's something interesting in what you're doing for other people. We just have to figure out how to tell that story and to who to tell it to. So are you guys ready for media training? Quick and dirty?
Okay, Jim, at this point, if they're going to transition, I'm going to bug off. I have to travel tomorrow.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Hi, it
Hunt.
was nice to see y'all.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Dr. Hunt.
Well, I'll be honest, when I found out that I had to talk to faculty at Prairie View, I told my daughter, and she's a graduate student, and she said, Dad, they're probably not going to respect you because you're not an academic. And I said, I know that, Alyssa. And that's why I had those other two academics help me, because I wanted somebody who, one of your colleagues explained to you why this is useful to them, and maybe that might relate to you better. Other than that, I guess let's talk about the working with the media. That's mostly what I did in my life. I'm kind of a cultural interpreter to, in many ways, between what the media needs and what the institution that I'm working at needs. That's how I view my role. And I guess we could just start off. The first thing, any kind of media inquiries, I would get Candace in the loop on that over at your Marcom shop. If you are interested in pushing a story, or if you get a call, give her a ring, talk through it with her. She can help you. If you got your own media contacts, that's fantastic. She probably would actually like to hear about them too, so she can help make sure that they get any kind of announcements from your university that she's putting out. Getting free press really is the most cost-efficient way to let the public know about our work here at the system, at Prairie View. Even if it just doesn't feel like it's part of your function, it can help enhance what it is you do. Let's talk briefly about different kinds of media and what they're looking for. And understand, none of this is rocket science. You understand this already. TV and radio want personal and human interest stories, much more than print. They're also impressed with public officials in action. TV is driven by the image. TV especially likes personal interest stories where they can take a person, they call it the stick figure, take a person who represents the story, put them at the top. That's good and that's bad. Understanding that's important because you can help take advantage of it once you understand it. Newspaper and print is much more about specifics and details, much more about the narrative of your story, the long-term narrative, not really very visually driven. And all web-based media it's all about immediacy and hyper locality, both things that can work to your advantage and work against you. Some simple things about if you have an interview, make sure you know where you're going. Prepare ahead of time. I actually like to list out a few things that I want to hit, a few three key bullet points, and make sure I hit those as I'm talking. And even if usually for me, it would be about something, an issue here at the system or previous life, is political issues. But even if it's about your own work and you don't want to get lost in the weeds, mark those 3 points that you want to hit. One of the problems with giving a reporter a whole bunch of words is that gives him or her the opportunity to select which of your words they're going to use. If you can give them a more focused version of your words, whatever they're going to pick is going to be more representative of what it is that you were looking to get out to begin with. So it helps to write a few things down, be concise, Maybe even practice it if you're kind of new at this. A small tip: don't drink carbonated beverages before a TV interview. Don't drink a soda or Coke before you go on TV. Trust me on that. I've learned it the hard way. Don't wear a pure white shirt like this. It washes out if you're going to be on TV. Don't wear a complicated pattern either. Try to stick with solid colors, just so it doesn't wash out or become a moire pattern in the screen. Be positive, be relaxed. I'm sure if you're talking about something that you know and you care about, it should come through. And don't be afraid to use examples. If you during interview, keep your eyes on the person interviewing you. Don't look at the camera. I don't know how many people saw the movie Talladega Nights. I know it's a ridiculous movie, but I wish I had it right now for my media training. In Ricky Bobby's first NASCAR win, his hands keep floating up, and just keep your hands down, keep relaxed, keep focused, be positive. You're in control of the interview, not the interviewer. If you're talking to a reporter, you should be saying what it is you want to say. Otherwise, you shouldn't probably be talking to them. And so try to stay in control. There's bridging techniques that if somebody asks you something, you can bridge toward the points you want to make. And there's also flagging techniques where you flag the points you're going to make before you make it. And that should be one of the set down. Is this helping at all? Am I making a rambling here? If you don't know the answer to a question, just say, I don't know. My own father, I don't think I ever heard him say, I don't know to any question, but he told me a lot of things that weren't actually true or accurate just because he could, say, I don't know. And I think it was a game for him at some points. And I mean, he had a good imagination. Just don't do that with the reporter. I mean, it's hard for someone with an education and who's confident to say, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you on that. But sometimes that's your safest answer because you can get in trouble by winging it. I've learned that the hard way too. Just if you know the first name of the person interviewing you, that's always good. That's kind of a Dale Carnegie technique. It's just kind of a pro tip to seem at ease. Make sure you know the difference between a live interview and a taped interview beforehand. Ask the interviewer, will it be live or will it be taped? If it's taped, don't be afraid to start over, to make a point again. If it's live, just keep plowing forward. But if it is taped, please take advantage of that and work with the reporter to make sure that you're communicating and that they're understanding what it is that you're trying to get across. Here's something, a little mnemonic that I used to use about how to have concise answers prepared. Think about sex. I know it's not what you're thinking. SECS is the mnemonic. Statement, explanation, conclusion, and then shut up. And the shut up for me is the important part. And I come from a political background where what you say can get you in trouble. But it's good training for any kind of communications because it helps you learn to focus what it is you're trying to get across. So think about this mnemonic when you're asked a question. Make your statement. Like today, I'm here to I hope to impart to you why you should work with the media. Explanation: working well with the media will enhance your ability to be a researcher. Conclusion: being an elevated researcher enhances your ability to get your job done and the image of your institution. And then shut up. I'm sure you could do this better than me. I'm trying to just make this up as I go along, but statement, explanation, conclusion, and then shut up. SECS. And it's easy to remember because sex, and nobody can forget sex. I'm looking over some notes here. Try not to say no comment. Try not to go off the record. Always stick to what you know is facts. Try to steer clear of jargon. Explain things to someone as you would in the grocery store, not to an academic colleague. I'm running out of tips here. As far as social media, treat anyone with a camera as you would a reporter. Everybody's a reporter now with social media. That's good and it's bad. Understand and appreciate reporters and social media's relentless need for content. If I'm a TV reporter now, I'm having to generate content 3 and 4 times a day. I'm having to feed the social media beast. I'm having to come up with a story by 4 o'clock. And I'm having to refresh that story by 10. I don't have a lot of time. I certainly don't have time to read academic papers. If you can help boil it down and tell me what I need to know, I'm just going to regurgitate it like it's fact without even thinking about it. And that gives you a bit of control. And it also gives you an opportunity. So take advantage of the fact that they're busy and that they have a relentless need for content, and look for ways that you can help fill that need of theirs. If you're helpful to a reporter, they're going to come back to you time and time again. On that note, also, one of the most important things you can be for reporters, just be available. I know you're busy. They know you're busy. Everybody's busy. Take the call. It takes just a few minutes. Nobody's too busy to stop for a few minutes and talk to a reporter. The chancellor will do it. And he's probably busier than anybody I know, but if he gets a call, he's going to have 2 or 3 staffers, first of all, bird dog it and make sure he knows everything about it, but he's going to get back to it because he understands the importance of it. He's told me that he's not all that smart, but he can count votes. And that has been the path to his career. And that basically is his way of explaining that working with the regents and providing what the regents see as critical is important. And the regents determine what's critical based on what they read in the media. I've not ever seen the regent or the chancellor read any academic publications yet. And I know that's important in academia to be published in these journals, but to be able to break out of that orbit and get into a mainstream media is where you'll be heard outside of academia. And that's important. And understand that your administration is outside of academia, as weird as that sounds. They're not living in the same world as you. Let's see, interviews, do's and don'ts. Be positive, be relaxed, smile, be comfortable, stand up straight, shoulders back, hands to the side, stick to what you know. Try not to fake it. And that's kind of what I've got. I mean, that is a quick and dirty media training. You could pay someone for 4 hours and they'll string that up for 4 hours, but that's basically what you're going to get. Is there anything I can help you with? I mean, basically, I understand media a lot better than I understand academia.
Jim, I've got several questions here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One question is, you mentioned the bridging technique. Can you talk more about the bridging technique? And you mentioned another technique also. Can you talk about that and maybe give a couple of examples? We've got just about 10 or 15 minutes left.
Sure. Bridging is just a kind of a weaselly way to move from what the reporter is asked to what it is you want to talk about. Like you've just asked me to move to bridging. I can't think of an example right now. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about, which is what I'm going to have for lunch. Or I guess, let's see. Let me think of a good example here. Dr. Mitchell, the law school professor we had on earlier, his great accomplishment is passing this law that protects property rights for African Americans. He got that passed through the Texas legislature without a lot of hoo-ha, because he portrayed it as a private property rights law rather than anything that had anything to do with African Americans. And so if I were Thomas Mitchell and a reporter were to ask me about Black Lives Matter, I wouldn't want to touch that. I would want to talk about my private property rights law that I've drafted, because I don't want to get tangled up in what the reporter's trying to tangle me up in. And so I would say, well, that's in the news right now, but what I'm here to talk about is my law that I've written. Literally just acknowledge it and move on. It's not rocket science. It's forcing your way to go back to your point. Acknowledge what the reporter has said. You don't need to answer it. You don't need to go into it. You don't need to fill their embarrassing silences. You need to be talking about what you would like to talk about.
So don't controlling the narrative.
Exactly. It's just a way to bridge back to what your point that you would like to talk about is. Flagging is a way to let the reporter know that you're going to say something that's important. If I've got 3 bullet points written down, and if I'm Thomas Mitchell and one of them is this law protects private property rights, before I say that, I'm going to tell the reporter that this is important. I'm going to say, the most important thing you need to hear today is this law protects private property rights. And I'm not going to jumble it up with a bunch of details after that. I'm going to tell him what I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him that, and then I'm going to tell him what I told him. Because he's busy, or he or she's busy, they probably don't understand what you're talking about. And that kind of repetition and simplification is going to make sure that you're communicating to them what you're trying to get across. And then it's not just coming across like I don't know if you ever watched Charlie Brown, and whenever the adults would talk on Charlie Brown,
right?
I sometimes feel that's how reporters listen to academics when they talk.
Okay, I have another question for you. What do you think about writing opinion pieces?
Opinion pieces are great. They're included in the clips every morning, just with the other clips. I'm sure you're all familiar with The Conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an opinion piece that gets in The Conversation, that gets real lift, and that's going to be published across the country. And you're not only will your colleagues see it, editors and reporters at higher education, those higher education publications that everybody cares about, it's going to see it. The chancellor's going to see it. Your mother might even see it. I think opinion pieces are great. And if you need help, call me up or work with your Marcoms group. Generally, newspapers like about 600 words. 600 words explaining something important in 600 words. It's almost like a haiku. It really makes you think it through, and you really have to make sure you understand it well enough to be able to spit it out in 600 words in a way that someone's going to understand. And I frankly love writing op-eds because I guess I have a short attention span. It makes me, 600 words is plenty for me.
Okay, so another question is, do we need approval before we reach out about controversial issues?
That's a loaded question. No, you've got the freedom to do what you want. There's always consequences, I would guess. I would always recommend working with your Marcom group with Candace there to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And I know that, frankly, you've got Prairie View is rife for controversial issues right now. You've got your Racial Justice Center that's forming up that if they're going to be any good at all, they're going to make some waves. Otherwise they're not effective. And that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. So, but you got to be true to your mission. As long as it's true to your mission and not, I've seen some professors get caught up in sideshow stuff that's not really about their research, but it's something about they feel about politically strongly. Mm-hmm. And that seems to sometimes overcome them and overshadow their work. But a little bit of controversy can really help lift your point as well. Don't be afraid of it. Just be aware that it cuts both ways. Frankly, I'm kind of with P.T. Barnum there's no such thing as bad publicity as long as you spell the name right. Not everybody here feels that way, understand. But I think that controversy can be used to get your message out. When I left newspapers to go work for a politician, one of the first things that politician did was sue the Sierra Club. And I was worried about how that would be portrayed in the news. And he assured me that he's like, Jim, I'm a Republican. In Texas, this is going to help me. And he was courting the controversy just for the press. And I'm not recommending that because you're not in politics, but
Right.
There is that dynamic. I mean, I just don't know if that's necessarily the best for academia.
Mhm.
Talk to kids or, I mean, or even your president. I think President Simmons has a real grasp on this.
Yes, she absolutely does. You said, why is it important to publish outside of academia? Can you say a little bit more about that? And then I'm going to ask you about someone who's in the press a lot recently.
Sure. Well, every morning, the first thing when the chancellor and the regents wake up, they read the clips published in the mainstream media. They're not reading the academic journals. They are basing their opinions and their information on what's happening across the system based on what they read in the newspaper every morning. And so are lawmakers, and so are local opinion leaders and local civic leaders. That's really how the world sees what you do. Inside of academia, academic publications are critical. But for the rest of the world to see what you do and understand what you do, you've got to break out of that orbit.
Okay, before we got started today, Jim, you were talking with me about someone who's getting a lot of press because of a phrase that they coined. Can you talk about that?
That's right.
And that's just an example of going outside of the world of academia.
Well, and I apologize, I can't recall his name right off the top of my head, but there's a business professor over at the Mays Business School at the flagship at Texas A&M who had been studying resignations kind of in obscurity for years. And when COVID hit, he coined the phrase, the Great Resignation, because he noticed in the data that he was looking at that more and more people were leaving their jobs. And this phrase, the Great Resignation that he coined, has changed his life. It's gotten him, I tried to get him to participate in this, but he was too busy with TV and newspaper and radio interviews talking about the Great Resignation, which is really an encapsulation of his research, but he's not trying to give them the present. He's encapsulated it in a way that they can understand, and it's raised the profile of the Mays Business School. It's raised his profile, and it's made him too busy to be even able to join us on a call. At this point, I'm not sure if it's helped him with his research yet, I was almost reluctant to bring him up because it's made him so busy. I'm not sure he is doing much research right now. But being that busy, sometimes it helps the money roll in, and it'll enable your ability to do that research in the future. So I hope that makes sense.
Mhm. There's another question in the chat box, Jim. It says, I have received an NEH grant recently for my first book project on gender and British literature. And I have been publicizing my award in academia with the help of the Office of Sponsored Research and other in-field organizations. I have not yet publicized my research beyond professional circles. Any specific tips to begin this process as an early career researcher?
Sure. Go to Candace over at your marketing and communications shop and tell her, I would like to get the word out about this. What can I do? I'm sorry, what was the research about again?
Gender and British literature.
Okay. You're probably
very timely.
I'm sorry?
Very timely.
Exactly. You need to look for, there's going to be a news peg for that somewhere. Hi. If you can find, I mean, like I have this software here called Cision, and I can plug in keywords and see which reporters are writing about which issues. And it'll bring me up a list of, I could plug in keywords, British literature, gender roles, and it'll bring me up a list of reporters who have written about British literature and gender roles and the same thing. And then I'll go through that list and I can cull it down. And then I might just cold call those people and talk to them if I were you. Or you look at where they live in social media world, what their social media universe is. And then you insert yourself into that social media world, either via hashtags or via directly communicating with them or engaging whatever conversations the opinion leaders in that world are in. And that starts it in social media. Social media is real media, but it's also much, much different than traditional print. It's almost easier to get in. Like one time, rather than put out a press release, I just posted something on Reddit in Austin just to see what would happen. If we could get news out via a Reddit post into an actual newspaper, and it worked. This was about old historical archives that we had. So don't be afraid to go on Reddit. I see people are logging. Please go easy on me, please. I'm not an academic. I'm not an educator. I'm just some guy working in the office here doing the best I can.
Thank you so much.
Sure. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me directly or contact me via email. And I might make more sense in person than I have on Zoom.
Great information today, Jim. I certainly do appreciate your time and the information you shared, and also that of the panelists that you invited. I think that this whole Research Visibility series is kind of shedding some light on the importance, as you said, of living outside of the world of academia. Of course, we also always want our researchers to be published in journals, but to be recognized on a grander scale, on a larger scale, global scale even, it's important that we go beyond the academia, so that when something important happens and CNN is seeking someone as an expert, why not you? You're an expert, so why not talk to you? You're the only person that knows about your research, and we want your name to be in the pool of possibilities. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, exactly. And I'm passionate about that one for Prairie View particularly. I had a reporter from the Wall Street Journal call me up looking for a poultry expert from Texas A&M last week. And I sent him to Prairie View. He didn't call looking for Prairie View, but Prairie View's got poultry experts just like A&M does. And when he realized that he could get a Prairie View poultry expert, he was even happier. But you guys are just as expert as anybody else's experts, and I think I would rather get you guys in the press over the flagship any day, honestly. So help me out.
We are doing what we can to make sure that the word gets out. Again, thank you, everyone. I put a survey link in the chat box, and I'll add it again. Please take a minute and complete that survey. That helps to make sure that we are providing information that is of value to you. We thank you again, Jim, for all of your information, and your panelists as well. And we'll see you next week for another installment of our Research Visibility series. Have a great day.
Thanks.